For our first soup, we are making this loaded baked potato soup. It is so good. You're going to start off by adding your cashews into a little pot with water, and we're going to boil these for about 20 to 30 minutes, or you can soak them overnight. Then we're going to take about 4 strips of vegan bacon. I'm using the one from Hooray Foods. It was really delicious. I was actually very impressed. I chopped it up nice and small. Then in the pot that we're going to cook the soup, I added the bacon into and let that cook according to package directions. And you'll see that bacon is letting off some oil, and that's great. It has flavor in there. It's delicious. We're going to remove the bacon once it's cooked, and then we're going to add in a little more olive oil and our onions, and we're going to cook the onions in the remaining oil from the bacon and in the olive oil. Cook them until they're like translucent. Then you're going to add in 4 chopped potatoes, and we're going to add in our water. I'm using yellow potatoes, or you can use russet potatoes. And then I'm also going to add in a spoonful of better than bouillon to give it some really nice flavor. You're just going to let this cook for about 20 minutes until the potatoes are nice and fork tender, stirred occasionally. At this point, you can blend up your cashews, so drain out any excess water, add them into a blender with half a cup of non-dairy milk, unsweetened, unflavored, blend until nice and creamy and smooth, and it should look like this. I call this like a cashew heavy cream. At this point, our potatoes are nice and soft, so I'm going to transfer most of the soup into my Vitamix blender. I am going to leave a little bit in the bottom of the pot. You can also use an immersion blender for this, and just be careful. Make sure you're using a blender that's appropriate to use with hot liquids. And you can see I left maybe like, I don't know, half a cup in the bottom of the pot. So then once we blended it up smoothly, I'm going to transfer that into the pot and mix it up all together. This is definitely a really nice and thick creamy soup, and I like to add water into the bottom of my blender to first of all get any of the potato mixture that I kind of couldn't get out, and also just to help thin out the soup. So I added probably like 1.5 cups to 2 cups of water, and you can add as much or as little water as you like. Now we're going to add in about 1/3 of a cup of vegan sour cream. I'm using the one from Tofutti. We're going to add in some salt, some garlic powder, and some black pepper, but add in any seasonings that you like. And we're just going to let this cook for about 5 to 7 minutes until the vegan sour cream is kind of like melted down and everything is really smooth and creamy and warmed through completely. Once it is all done, it will be time to serve. And just look at how creamy and luscious that is. So once everything had been broken down, I removed it from the heat, and it just looks so good. So I'm going to add it into my little crock, and then we're going to garnish it. This is where the important part is. We're going to add in some vegan sour cream, some chives, some vegan cheddar shreds, some of that vegan bacon, and some black pepper. You know, we're going to basically garnish it and add what you would with a normal baked potato. And this soup is absolutely delicious. It was non-vegan approved. It's amazing, and it literally feels like you're eating a bowl of baked potato. Like, it's so weird, but it's so good. I don't know. It's just, you have to try it. It's delicious. To start our soup, we have to prep 3 things. First, we have our sweet onion. I'm specifically using the Vidalia onion, so I'm going to cut it into slices and then chop it up. You can use a white onion or a yellow onion. I just prefer a sweet onion. I think it gives the soup really nice flavor. And just try to chop everything approximately the same size. Scoop that into a bowl, put it to the side for a second. The next thing we have to prep is just 3 cloves of garlic, so I'm just crushing them with my knife and then removing the skin and just giving it a rough chop. Again, nothing precise here. It's just going to go cook in the soup, and it's just going to make great flavors. And the last thing that we're going to prep is, of course, our broccoli. So this is a broccoli crown, which I think has like a smaller stem, as you can see. So I'm just cutting off that little bottom part there, and then I'm going to pick off any leaves that are kind of in the way, and then we're just going to chop up this whole broccoli crown. I'm using the stem and all. It's perfect in this soup. It cooks down and gets nice and tender, and you can cut it into however big or small pieces that you like. It really just depends on preference. I like to do a variety of sizes, honestly, and I like to get every single part. So even all those like little floret pieces that fall off, I like to make sure I get them. So let's go over to the stove. We're going to pour some oil into a nice big pot, and then we're going to add in our onion and garlic. Over low heat, we are going to let this saute for 5 to 7 minutes until it is fragrant and the onions are translucent. Add in your vegan butter and let that melt down. We are going to make a roux for the base of this soup. So you're going to combine the melted vegan butter with all-purpose flour, and you're just going to mix that up until it almost forms into like a dough and the butter has absorbed the flour. Now we're going to slowly add in non-dairy milk. So you're going to add a little in, whisk, add a little in, whisk, and you're going to keep doing this about maybe 1/4 of a cup at a time, because you don't want this roux to become clumpy in the soup. You want this to just be a nice thickening agent. If this is your first time making something like this, just go slow, be patient, and the biggest thing is just to keep whisking. So this way you get a nice smooth consistency for your soup. Now we can add in some shredded carrots, our chopped up broccoli. We're going to add in low sodium vegetable broth. I like low sodium for this since we're going to add in the cheddar cheese. Nutritionally, salt and pepper. Give this a mix, and then you're just going to let this cook over low heat for about 15 minutes. It should be bubbling a little bit, but not like a heavy boil, and keep stirring it occasionally, like every 3 to 5 minutes. Just give it a stir. Add in your vegan cheddar shreds, mix that around, let that cook for another about 5 minutes, and then you're going to give it a taste. It is most likely going to need more salt, but I just like to be able to control my saltiness, so we're going to add some extra salt and black pepper, and then it was absolutely perfect. But if you want to add in different seasonings, be my guest. Do what you want. It is your soup. It is your kitchen. And yeah, now that's it. Tastes good. So we are done, and we can just enjoy this soup. This is my favorite kind of soup. I mean, it just looks so good. Now we have to plate it up, of course we got to plate it up. So let's add it into our nice bowl, add a nice few big scoops in there. And of course you can enjoy this as a meal, as an appetizer, you know, however much you want to have. We're going to garnish it. I'm using some fresh oregano. It just looks really pretty. And I also added some vegan cheddar shreds on top. And that is it. We're going to cut up some crusty bread to serve on the side. You could pair it with croutons or something. That would be really good. And now your soup is all done. It's delicious. It's ready to eat, and it is the perfect fall meal. And it is, like, seriously my favorite soup ever. You're going to absolutely love it. For our next soup, we're making this vodka tortellini soup. So basically, think of like all the goodness of vodka sauce in here. So we're going to take olive oil and vegan butter, let that melt down. I'm using the Earth Balance vegan butter. And then we're going to add in some chopped up garlic and onion. You're going to let that cook for about 5 to 7 minutes until fragrant and the onions are translucent. Make sure nothing burns, of course. Then you're going to add in 3/4 cup of vodka. And you want to use a vodka that you like to drink. So, you know, make sure it's something that you think tastes decent. And we're going to let that cook for about 7 minutes and reduce down by about half. So you'll see in a second the difference, how much that reduced down. And then we're going to add in our tomato paste, and just giving some nice squeezes of that in there. Mix that up, and then we're going to add in our vegan creamer. I'm using the one from Califia Farms. It's like an almond and coconut creamer, I believe. It was pretty good. It was a little thinner than I would have maybe liked. Maybe the silk heavy cream would be better for this. So you can maybe adjust the creamer amount depending on which vegan creamer you're using. Then we're going to add in 4 cups of water, and then we're just going to add in some seasonings. So I always like to add a little bit of sugar with my tomato sauce, and so I'm going to do that. I added more creamer in because I just felt like this creamer was really thin. I didn't expect it to be this thin. So I'm going to add in some organic sugar and some garlic powder, and that's it. Then we're going to add in our vegan parmesan, and then we're just going to let this cook and kind of boil and reduce down for about 15 minutes, just till everything gets nice and flavorful. From there, we're going to add in lots of fresh spinach, nice handfuls, and then we're going to add in our vegan tortellini. I'm using the Kite Hill non-dairy vegan tortellini. You can, of course, make your own tortellini. I have a recipe if you want it, but that's very time consuming. So I would either say to maybe use these, or if you can't find these, then you can use like gnocchi or something. That would be a good substitute. And just let these cook for about 3 to 4 minutes until the tortellini are floating at the top. Again, I just kept adding in more heavy cream because I was like, why is this not looking as creamy as I wanted it to? But I realized in the end that creamer was just very thin, but it was still delicious. So when it's all done, it looks like this, and you have this amazing, incredible broth. I don't really even like tomato soup, to be quite honest, but this was delicious and I want to eat it every day. And that is it. Now you have this amazing soup, and we are just going to add it to our bowl. I also love that you get the spinach in there. You could, of course, add in some extra veggies if you like. Top it with red pepper flakes and some extra vegan parmesan, and I like to add a few pieces of basil in to be fancy, and that's it. Another delicious soup. Start this off by making our dough. So I'm taking 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, half a teaspoon of salt, and 3/4 cup of warm water, and I'm putting this into a blender. You can do this in a food processor, you can do this with a stand mixer, anything that you can use to make dough, or of course you can do it by hand as well, whatever you feel like doing. So I'm just gonna let this go until we get this kind of nice dough ball, and then I'm just gonna knead it for about a minute or two just to make it into a nice smooth disc. I'm eventually going to form it into a disc. We'll get there in a second. Of course, you can do this by hand, and if you can find store-bought wonton wrappers, that would be great as well. You can find them in some food stores and Asian markets. So I'm fashioning it into the disc, and now I'm going to put it onto a plate, and we're going to cover it with a clean kitchen towel and set that aside for 20 to 30 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to work on our filling. This is textured vegetable protein. It is dehydrated soy bits. It works really great as like a ground meat replacement. So we're going to rehydrate this with water. We have 3/4 cups of the textured vegetable protein and 3/4 cup of water. And we're just going to set this aside for 10 minutes. Just let that rehydrate itself. Once it's rehydrated, we're going to add all the ingredients for the filling into a food processor or blender. So I'm taking some low sodium soy sauce, some sesame oil. I have this cabbage blend that I get from Trader Joe's, the hydrated textured vegetable protein, 2 green onions that I just kind of roughly chopped up, and some garlic and ginger powder. And then we're just going to pulse that until it's broken down, and it'll look something like this. It should kind of be this like crumbly filling, and this will be great for sticking inside the wonton wrappers. So when I press on the dough, you can see my fingers leave a dent and doesn't bounce back too much. So we are good to go with working on the dough. I always like to work in things in halves, just makes everything easier. So I'm separating the halves. Then we are going to lightly flour our surface and going to start to roll this out. If you have a pasta machine, you can also make the dough rolled out that way as well. So I'm just going to do this by hand though with my rolling pin. It takes a few minutes, and eventually you get it into this really thin dough, and you want it to be as thin as possible. And I'm just doing my best to kind of form it into a large rectangle square. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to take a really sharp knife or a pizza cutter, and we're just going to clean up this rectangle. So as you can see, I'm just defining all these edges. Unfortunately, you can't really use these scraps for anything, so just try to be, you know, as careful as you can and leave as much as you can when cutting. So then I'm going to cut the rectangle into 4 columns first. So I just measured that out. I measured the whole rectangle, and then I just divided that by 4. So it was about 3.5 inches per column. So I'm just going to take my knife and cut like that with all of them. And you don't have to measure if you don't want to. It can help make it a little more precise. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to divide those into 3 rows. So I just measured the bottom and divided that by 3, and we're just going to cut it out, eventually making as close as we can get to square wrappers. So I'm just cutting them all out, and they look something like this. Then you're going to dust them lightly with cornstarch, and this will just help them not to stick to one another. And you can just place them all on a plate like this, and they'll look something like this when they're all done. You can put these in the fridge now if you wanted to wait and make these for another time, but we're going to move on. So I repeated with my other dough half, and now we're going to make our little wontons. So I'm taking about half of a heaping teaspoon of the filling to 1 teaspoon, just depending on how big the wrapper is. Placing that on the bottom. We're going to lightly line the top with water, and then we're going to fold it over so we get a nice little rectangle now, like this kind of tiny rectangle. And you're just going to use your fingers to really push everything down and make sure it's sealed. And then it's easier just to watch this. Just fold the 2 bottoms over, put a little dab of water, and this is an easy way to make a little wonton wrapper. It looks so cute. I found this way of doing it in another girl's video, so I will link that down below. You can of course do it a more traditional way, and I'll have videos linked for the more traditional pleating down below, but these were really cute and I find it to be more forgiving. So this is how our dumplings turned out, and they look really cute. This is a more traditional way of folding the wontons, so whatever you like to do. I don't really think it ultimately matters because you're just eating this for yourself and you're enjoying it at home. But they look really cute, and I actually really like this shape. So you'll have some leftover filling. You can just save that for more dumplings or eat it with rice. It's still delicious. Then I have 2 cups of the Trader Joe's miso ginger broth, and I'm going to put in a handful of spinach. And then I'm just going to put my little wontons in there. I'm only going to make 8 at a time because I'm not going to eat 24 wontons in one sitting. So I'm just making 8 of them. You're going to let this boil for 10 minutes. That's it, all done. How good does this look? I love the steam coming off. I topped it with the Trader Joe's chili onion crunch, some black and white sesame seeds, and green onion, and that's all you have to do. To freeze them, all I did was put them on a lime baking sheet for an hour, let them freeze, and then you can pop them into a container. And now, of course, we have to take a bite of our delicious soup, and that inside is just so good, and the textured vegetable protein works really well in here. I think you guys are really going to like this. It definitely reminded me of the wonton soup I used to eat from takeout. So to start off, obviously you need onions. I used about 5 sweet onions, and I'm just going to start by cutting the onion in half. Then I'm going to cut off the top part, and I'm going to peel off that outside skin. Once your onion is a little naked, just keep that root on there back there, so that way the onion doesn't fall apart as you're slicing, and you can just cut this into nice slices. So once they were cut into those big chunks, I just lightly separated them with my fingers, so that way they were all individual pieces of onion. So you're just going to repeat this with all of your onions. So your eyes are probably watering like crazy by now. Mine definitely were, but these are all of our onions chopped up. So now I'm going to put a big pot on my stove, turn the heat on. I'm putting it on a medium-low heat, and we're going to start off by adding in 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 2 tablespoons of vegan butter. And I like to use the Miyoko's vegan butter for this. Then once that melted down, we can finally add in all of our onions. So you're going to have a lot of onions in there. It's going to be like filled to the top with onions, but we're going to cook these very, very slowly until they reduce down. You'll see at the end. So I'm just giving them a nice little mix together and making sure everything's coated in the olive oil and butter. And then you can also cover it with a lid if you want to help. So as you can see here, they reduced down a lot and they turned golden and caramelly color. That's exactly what we're going for. This takes about 40 minutes to get to this stage, but it's important so the French onion soup has good flavor. Then I'm gonna add a little bit of salt, pepper, and balsamic vinegar and apple cider vinegar. Instead of using wine, it kind of gives the same effect. So just mix that all together, kind of deglaze the bottom of the pot, and then we can start adding in our veggie broth after. Yes, I spilled a little. It kind of got everywhere. That's okay. So then I just gave this a mix around. And if you like your French onion soup on the sweeter side, you can also add in like a teaspoon of sugar. I just don't particularly care for that. In a tea infuser, I put some bay leaves and thyme, so that way I could just stick it in there and it wouldn't go everywhere in the soup, and I could just easily pull it out. And then while the soup cooks for about 15 minutes, I just cut up some bread. I got a baguette from Trader Joe's, very fitting for our French onion soup. And I'm just gonna lightly toast those pieces of bread, so that way when we put them in the soup, they don't turn into complete mush. So just pop them in the oven for like 10 minutes. So I'm using 3 cheeses, the Follow Your Heart mozzarella, the Follow Your Heart parmesan, and the Violife parmesan. All 3 of these together were amazing. So I am going to grate the mozzarella. Then we can get ready to serve our soup up. So I'm going to place my soup into my little bowls. I placed 3 pieces of bread, and then I added the vegan mozzarella first, and you're gonna add a lot of it because it needs to be nice and cheesy on top. And then we're gonna add the vegan Follow Your Heart parmesan, and then finally top it off with some extra grated Violife. I felt all these flavors together really worked to give it the flavor I remembered it having. So these are them before we put them in the oven to broil them. You're just gonna broil them on a medium heat for about 5 to 10 minutes. The cheese is gonna get really bubbly, nice and browned up. It's gonna be perfect. So this is them when they are all done, and look at these beauties. Oh my goodness, that golden brown, that bubbliness of the cheese, they were bubbling like crazy in the oven. It was awesome. I was so happy to see that. So I just topped it with a few sprigs of fresh thyme and a crack of black pepper to be fancy, and that is it. This is our very, very easy French onion soup, and just look at this. Oh yes. So I prepped most of the veggies off screen, but I wanted to show you how to prepare leeks. So this is a trimmed leek. I got it at Trader Joe's, and as you can see, it has that little end on it, so I'm just going to chop that off. If you get leeks that are bigger, you may need to chop off more of those leafy green parts. The trimmed ones already kind of have that chopped off, and I'm just chopping off that top part just because it gets dried out. You're going to cut it in half, and then you're just going to start slicing. It's very simple, but just in case you've never worked with leeks before and you feel kind of intimidated by them, I just wanted to show you that they are very simple to work with. And then I'm just going to put them in a bowl. So you want to wash them pretty well. These leeks were actually not very dirty at all, but I've had some leeks where there's a lot of sand and grit in there. So you want to just fill the bowl up with water, run your fingers through it like that, and then rinse that water out. Now we're going to put our stove on a pretty low heat, and we're going to add our olive oil into a pot. We're going to add in our leeks, some chopped onion, some chopped carrots, chopped celery, and chopped garlic. Add a little bit of salt and pepper to that, and we are just going to saute it over the heat for about 5 minutes, mixing it occasionally until everything turns, a little translucent, starts to smell fragrant. You know what we're going for. It'll look something like this. Then we're going to add in our chickpeas, our frozen peas, our chopped potatoes. I tried to cut these up really small. Our kale, and I'm just kind of ripping some of those pieces if I need to fit it in there better. We're going to add in about 3 cups of water, and then we're just going to let this kind of cook up. I'm going to add in some better than bouillon in there. I love better than bouillon, or you can just use vegetable broth if you want, whatever you like to do. And yeah, I'm going to just mix that all in there. We're going to cover it with a lid, leave it slightly vented, raise your heat a little bit, like to a medium-low heat now. Bring it to a boil. Once it's boiling, you can remove the lid. Let it boil for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you will, start to see everything is really cooking, and really the only thing that needs to soften a lot is going to be the potatoes. But it's looking good. We're going to add in our spinach now. Spinach cooks a lot quicker than kale does. That's why I waited to add it in. If you want to add it in all one shot, that's fine. We're going to add in some vegan pesto in there. Mix that in, which is so flavorful and so delicious. You can use homemade, or I'm just actually using the one from Trader Joe's to make my life easy. I'm going to test a potato now after the soup's been boiling for about 15 minutes and just test the broth. Potatoes were cooked and good, so I'm just going to add some red pepper flakes in because that's what I wanted to add into my soup. You can add in, salt, pepper, garlic powder, whatever you like. Our soup is all done. It looks beautiful. I love everything in there, and I love all the colors and the textures. Like I said, the only thing you want to make sure is that your potatoes are fully cooked. So as long as those are soft, you're good to go. We can plate it up. Looks so beautiful. This soup is great because it's very light but also hearty. Like it's filling. You can add some extra pesto on top to make it pretty. I mixed it with a little water just to help thin it out to drizzle. We're going to add some microgreens, of course. They're beautiful. I love them. And it's another form of greens. And I added some coarse sea salt on top too. And that's it. This is our gorgeous soup. It's all done. It's ready to enjoy. Like I said, I think some crusty bread is just perfect on the side. You can also make homemade garlic knots if you want on the side of this. That would be so good. And of course, we have to take a nice big bite. The soup really was so delicious. Starting off with potato leek soup because it is my absolute favorite. It is creamy, comforting, and so good. So let's first talk about leeks. I already chopped up 2 leeks. I'm going to show you how to do it. So this is a leek in case you don't know. You're going to cut off the bottom and the top part, and then you're just left with this middle piece here. Leeks can be very dirty. You can see there's some little bit of sand right there, but that's okay. I'm going to show you how to properly wash them. So first you're going to cut it down the center, and I'm going to take off those little outer leaves because they were kind of getting soft. My leek sits on the counter for a few days. And then we are just going to thinly slice it down the whole thing. Then we are going to transfer all of our leeks into a big bowl, and I'm going to cover them with water. And this is how we're going to wash them. Luckily, my leeks were very, very clean actually. It just depends. Sometimes they can be really dirty, sometimes they're not. So you're just going to lightly shake the top and just kind of shake them loose and move them around. Don't touch the bottom. Any sand and dirt is going to go down to the bottom, so don't go down to the bottom and then scoop all that dirt back in there. And then put it into a separate bowl. Again, do this very carefully. You can see the water's a little murky. Because my leeks were pretty clean, I only washed them once. You might have to do this multiple times. So let's bring these over to the stove. I'm gonna put in some vegan butter into a little pot. I realized my pot was too little, so I had to switch over to a larger size pot. So I put all my leeks in there, and then we are just going to let these caramelize and cook up for about 30 minutes. This is really important because it is going to add nice flavor and depth. This is already after 10 minutes of cooking, and you can see how much they've reduced down. While they're cooking, let's make some croutons. So I have some cut up bread cubes. I'm adding a little bit of olive oil, garlic powder, paprika, and salt to these guys, and we're just going to toss them up. I love making homemade croutons, and your old bread is perfect for this. And obviously bread cubes were falling out of everywhere. I was using too small of things, so I like to add the oil in batches so that way I can kind of distribute it evenly. So just keep tossing it around, add it to a lined baking sheet, and then you can also scrape the bottom of the bowl with some of the bread cubes to really make sure you got the oil and the seasonings on everything. And you're going to pop this in the oven and bake it for about 6 to 10 minutes, not very long. Now let's chop up our potatoes. I have Yukon Gold potatoes, and I'm going to cut these up as small as I can. The smaller you cut it, the faster it's going to cook and the faster it's going to boil, and the quicker you'll be eating your delicious soup. So just chop all these guys up. We're going to bring this over to the stove. Our leeks are done. Look at that. They've reduced down so much. They're almost like a paste. This is exactly what you want, low and slow. And then we are going to add our potatoes on there. I'm going to add in some water with the vegetable bouillon cube, or you can also use low sodium vegetable broth, whatever you have. And we are going to bring this to a boil and let this boil for about 15 minutes or until the potatoes are fork tender. Just, you can slip the fork in there easily. And then you can use an immersion blender, or I didn't have one, so I just transferred it into my regular blender. Just do this carefully, and if you're using a smaller blender, be sure to do this in batches. Blend it up until you have this beautiful puree. Looks so good already, and it already tastes so good. We're gonna add in a cup of non-dairy milk, and we're gonna add in some vegan sour cream. Give that a mix around, and then you can add in some more water to thin it to your preference. I kind of like it to be thicker. If you want a little thinner, add more. You're gonna add salt and pepper to taste, and then that's it. You're just gonna let the soup warm up completely, and it is all done, and it is now time to serve it up. I mix a little bit of vegan sour cream with water to make kind of like a vegan cream just to put on top. It looks so pretty. I feel like it makes it like you're eating at a restaurant. We're gonna add our homemade croutons on there, and then I also topped it with some microgreens and black pepper, and that's it. Our potato leek soup is all done. On to our second soup. We're making this delicious slow cooker lentil stew. It is hearty, it is satisfying, it is comforting, it is amazing. So just gonna put everything in the crock pot pretty much. So I'm adding in some low sodium vegetable broth, some green lentils that I did just soak for a few minutes before, some chopped up potato, carrot, onion, and celery. And then I'm also gonna add in a can of coconut milk to make it really creamy and really satisfying and good. You can use light coconut milk if you want, or regular coconut milk. Gonna add in a little bit of water, and then just give this a mix around just to make sure everything's kind of getting well incorporated, and also to break down that coconut cream. We're gonna add a little bit of black pepper, and then we're gonna add in some salt, some dried thyme, and some bay leaves. And then we're just going to give this another mix up, and that's it. We're just gonna let the slow cooker do its thing. You can cook it on high for 4 to 5 hours, or until the lentils are soft. If you don't have a slow cooker, you can of course do this on the stove as well. And then I just took our top off. My soup was all done, and it looks so good. And the lentils are soft, the potatoes are soft. Make sure everything is soft. It might need more time to cook. If it does, that's okay. Then you're gonna remove the bay leaves before serving, so that way nobody chokes on a bay leaf. And that's it. You're gonna plate it up, and just, oh my goodness, how good does this look? It is so, so good. My whole family and I ate this for dinner actually that night, and it was really delicious. Add some garnishes, and that's it. Easy peasy done. And that's all you have to do. For our final soup, we are going to make lemon chicken orzo soup, which is another one of my favorites. It is so good. I just love anything lemon. So we're going to start off by putting some olive oil into our pot, and we're going to saute our garlic. I just roughly chopped this garlic up. And then we're going to add in some water and low sodium vegetable broth. I just like to use low sodium vegetable broth as my preference because I can control the salt then. And the juice of 4 lemons. Yes, 4 lemons to make this extra citrusy. And then we're going to bring that up to a boil, add in our orzo, and then I just like to lower the heat to like a medium high to keep it at a rolling boil and just to help the orzo cook. This will take about like 15 minutes. And then while that's cooking, I'm just going to prepare my seitan. So I'm just taking some cooking spray, putting that in my pan, and then I'm just going to put in some seitan. I had this rosemary garlic seitan in my house, so I figured it was perfect for this recipe. And then we are just going to crisp it up in the pan a little bit. I'm just following the package directions. You can also use chickpeas in here if you don't want to use seitan or something. So once the orzo is done, you can see it's kind of thickened the soup up a lot. So I'm going to add in a little bit more water. You can keep this soup as thick or as thin as you like, so just do it to your preference. I'm going to add in that seitan, but the seitan is also going to suck up some of the broth, so keep that in mind. And then I'm going to add my salt and pepper to taste. This soup is very simple but very flavorful and very, very delicious. And just let that all come warmed up, bring it to a little bit of a bubble, and then that's pretty much all you have to do. We are done. We are ready to plate. How beautiful does that look? Oh my goodness, this came out so good. I love anything lemon, so good. Plus you're getting some vitamin C. So let's plate it up. So beautiful, so easy. And you could add in more things to this. You could add in some spinach. You can make this as fancy as you want, but I want to keep this simple flavors. I'm gonna add some lemon slices and fresh parsley on top and a little bit of black pepper. And that's it. That's all we're adding to this, keeping it easy.